Hey guys, this is Lucas from Better Coding Academy, and in this video we will be continuing our code review. So over here I've got the project once again. I haven't made any changes since last time, and just a refresher on what happened is we restructured everything into app and then subsequent directories. The reason for doing this before kind of jumping into the code and more of the details surrounding that is just so that we can have a better understanding of where things should go, and then from there doing a refactor it just becomes a lot easier to manage. So let's go through this here. Specifically in this video, I want to talk about the use of Redux within this project. So if you can't tell, this project makes quite heavy use of Redux here. Let's have a look at the store. And what I'm going to do is the store is actually created here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie the store up with Redux Dev Tools. So that way we can get Redux Dev Tools working for this project so that we can have a look at what is going on here and what exactly is being stored in there. So in order to get that working, let's just go to Redux Dev Tools extension, and there should be a way to enable that. I can't remember it off the top of my head, so I'm going to copy compose enhancers like that. So I first copy this one, which is const compose enhancers like that. And then what I do is for my middleware, I would do compose enhancers, apply middleware, and my middleware like that. So I do apply middleware like that, and then extra one there. So I do my store. This one should also probably be a constant. So the reason that we like to use constants over let is because a constant cannot be directly modified in terms of its value. If you have a value stored inside of a constant, that value cannot change. So one of the benefits to that is just more predictability across your code. So generally you just want to use constant where possible, and then only use let if you have no other choice. We're also going to import compose here from Redux. So we're going to do compose, create store, apply middleware, and we've got compose enhancers, which comes from here. So this should be working just fine. So now if you notice over here, it's a bit small, but this one here is green. So it's lit up now, which means we can open it up, and I've got mine right over here. So this one here, you'll notice we have at init, and then we have init blog, and then we have select user. So the init blog action takes in all of the different items all the way up to 99, and then select user specifically chooses a user. So I'm not too certain as to how exactly that works, but let's have a look at the state over here. So now in the final, after the final action that has passed through here, this is what our state currently looks like. So you'll notice that we have a blog list up here, which contains the 100 items from 0 to 99. We have a selected blog, we have user, and we also have comment list. So I'm going to put this one over here on the right. And inside of this here, we're going to select one of the items. So we're going to select, say, for example, item number 1. And you'll notice that if we go back here, now it's run select blog. So select blog, the action itself had a payload. The payload contained information about the item that was selected. Seems like it actually passes in the whole blog list item as well, and a whole bunch of headers and configuration. I'm not really sure what that's for and what the status is for here. But then anyways, all of that gets passed in. And then the difference between these two is now we have a selected blog as well. So selected blog seems to be a copy of this item here, which has user ID, title, body, and then this one down here. And then in blog comments now, it essentially populates the comments for this particular blog item. So I would say that this use of Redux is incredibly excessive. The reason I would say that is because Redux is a global state storage mechanism at heart. So when you have many things in here, some things are more obviously wrong and other things are kind of debatable, I guess. For the user here, I'm not too sure on what the user actually does specifically, or like how that works here. So I can't really comment on whether the user is a good fit here. But for things like comment list, it obviously does not belong here. The reason for that is because comment list is specifically for a particular item. So I would imagine that comments are like a subset of any particular blog item. You would have particular comments. So also when blog comments is loaded after a blog is selected and the comments are for that particular blog item, it instantly raises a red flag as to whether or not this belongs in this location within the Redux store. But as a more general point here, in terms of the overall use of Redux, I do think that none of these things belong inside the Redux store. So for example, the selected blog, this information should be essentially just an index or an ID based off of the blog items. And the blog items stored in blog list shouldn't be here, but should probably be stored inside of a component, because I don't see why you would specifically single that out to be stored inside the global Redux store. So you can imagine right now that you've got blog list stored in here, and you've only got 4 properties at the top level of your Redux store. But if you had an application which had to manage, say for example, say you're in Amazon and you have to manage the shopping cart, and you have to manage the products list not only for the homepage, but for additional pages, for sidebars, and you have to manage, the current specials, and you have to manage the current user, but also and how the current user relates to certain shopping carts and any specials that might be going on for that user, any vouchers, and all of this information. If all of it is put inside of the Redux store, then you have a huge Redux store just sitting there, right? And the problem with Redux is that it's not exactly native React either. So Redux obviously doesn't necessarily entail React, although the two are used together quite a lot. So my general attitude towards using Redux is as little as possible and only where strictly necessary. Personally as well is I don't like the use of thunk. My reasoning for that is because thunk can cause some very weird action trails here. Like for example, you've got let res equals await JSON placeholder.get your certain routes, and then you dispatch a payload with the result from that. However, this is now outside of your React component. So what that means is that you're starting to separate functionality away from your components. However, our components are the ones that are triggering this effect. For example, by visiting a page, I am triggering a certain fetch. The triggering of the fetch should not come from Redux, but instead it should come from React Router, and as an extension, the component that is requesting it. So this really does not belong in Redux here. So by having it in Redux here at this stage doesn't seem to cause too big of an issue. But let's just say, for example, that later down the track, you wanted to have the ability to cancel a certain request halfway through. So now with React, you would be able to do that if this were inside a React component, because then you'd be able to say, put this request inside of a ref, and then if your component gets unmounted, then you would try and cancel that. However, if you put it inside of Redux, you really have no clean way to do that. So that's just one example of a particular issue. And this issue arises not because of the way that Redux works or that Redux is insufficient or whatever, but it's just that when you're trying to put your functionality outside of React where it belongs, then you start to get issues with communicating between your first data store, which is React, and then your second data store, which is Redux. So then you have stuff all over the place, and your components start to make less sense because of Redux. So I'm going to show how I would refactor this here. Specifically, let's start with the app.js here. Is fine for now, and we've got blog container, which renders our homepage in terms of the 9 items here and the ability to move between items. So what we're going to do first is probably just, given the amount of code on this page and the amount of stuff that we're probably going to have to change, including using functional components instead of class-based ones here, we'd probably be best off recreating this component. So what I'm going to do is rename this one to .js or .old.js, and I would create a separate file here called blog container .js like that, and inside of this file here I would set up a stateless component like so, or I guess a functional one because we're going to add state to it, and then I would make sure that it is still running properly. So now it just says blog container, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to firstly see why that is the case. That shouldn't be there. And then we're going to fetch the items and put them onto the page. So now let's have a look first at the render method. When rendering a container, and then inside the container, if we have the blogs, then we render blog list, otherwise circular progress, and we have the page buttons. So what we're going to do is we are going to put the container onto the page and then put in a circular progress to start off with. So let's grab these two here. Material UI, core container, circular progress. I like to have my imports in alphabetical order like this. So the @ symbols would go on the very top, on top of React like that. So I have the path here, just to explain, this one here starts with an @ so they go on top, and then this one starts with an R, and then obviously the I here comes before the O. It doesn't matter what you name them, but it's more about the path here. That's how I like to do it for consistency's sake. So inside of here, I'm going to do a container max width equals MD. So I'm going to grab that, put that on this line here. And then I'm going to end off the container like that. And then inside of it, I'm going to do circular progress, and that should render properly onto my page. So let's have a look at that. I've got that over there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in the fetching for the blog items. So I've got blog list over here with blogs, which goes to page blogs. So let's go have a look at this blogs prop, which is getting passed in, and how we can replicate that functionality. So you'll notice here that on component did mount, we run init blog, and init blog corresponds to init blog from this up here, which comes from actions. So it is an action, and then the action init blog, basically it gets from /posts, and then we pass it into init blog, and it kind of goes through the whole Redux thing here. But instead of this, what we're going to do is we're going to use the API, and we're going to fetch it ourselves inside of the component. So in order to do that, first and foremost, let's add in an alias for API. So call this one API like that. When you add an alias, you have to restart parcel as of this video recording. Hopefully that can be fixed in the future. And what we're going to do here is we are going to import JSON placeholder from hash API like so, and that should allow us to import that. Hopefully it will do that for us. Cool, great. So now I've got that over here. What we're going to do is we are going to set up some internal state here, and also use effect. So we're going to use effect and use state to do this. So first and foremost, we're going to have a list of, we called it blogs here, so we'll probably keep the same name. So probably like just blogs, set blogs. And we're going to start off with use state being null, and null will probably just mean like there's nothing there for the moment. Using square brackets is probably a bad idea. The reason for that is because square brackets could potentially mean that you just don't have any items at the moment. So that could be a different state you want to render. So you might have the loading state, you might have the state with the items, and you also might have no blogs. That might be a third state you want to render. So using null here, I think makes more sense. We're going to do use effect here like so. Set up a basic component did mount style use effect, and inside of here we're going to do the fetching. So it's going to be something like this, but let's just grab this part here, and this one uses await JSON placeholder .get posts. So we can't use await keywords directly inside of use effect because we can't make this async because it can return a destructor, and async wouldn't allow that. So essentially what we're going to do here is we are going to wrap it in an IIFE. The other way is you can rewrite your code to use .then, but that's not really nice. So we can do this, and now we'll do a const result equals await JSON placeholder .get posts, and then I guess there's also some inconsistency here as to whether they're actually called posts or they're called blogs, but I think because of the route and we don't really have too much control over that, I think this is forgivable for now. In terms of the actual value getting returned from here, if we have a look at JSON placeholder, you'll notice that JSON placeholder is an Axios instance, and it goes through the base URL, and we get the data that way. Let's have a look at the data being returned by this URL here. So if we go to Chrome and we paste this in there, and we get /posts, so that instantly just returns all of the posts here, and inside of an array. So what we can do is we can just do const blogs, I guess, equals this, and then we can do .then res.data. So this will ensure that we only get the data back because we don't want any information about the request or the payload or the status or whatever else might be in there. So we just want the data, which is the array. So now we have that inside of blogs, and we can do set blogs, or alternatively, we can just do set blogs around this whole thing here. It's a little bit messy, but I mean, it does the trick and saves us a line of code. So now that should put the blogs into here, and what we're going to do is look at the old blog container again, and we're going to look at how we render it. So we render it using blog list here, which then uses page blogs, and page blogs is essentially a paginated version of the whole set of blogs here. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this, and we're going to do blogs triple equals null. If it is null, then we're going to show circular progress. Otherwise, we are going to show blog list, and the blogs here are going to just be blogs, and we obviously need to import blog list into here as well. So you'll notice that I put both of these imports in a separate group here. The reason I do that is because these two are aliased imports, so they are technically absolute, but they're different from global imports here because they're available only because we alias them. So these ones are also in alphabetical order. We start with A at the top and then C underneath the A. So that's how I would do that here, have this down there. Let's refresh and see if it works. So yeah, it does seem to be working, although it is incredibly slow. It has rendered all 100 items onto the page. So that's everything here showing. So now, even though I understand that we haven't replicated the full functionality, what we've done here using 85 lines of code and then additional stuff in Redux, we've essentially minimized down to 32 lines of code, which is a huge improvement. So that's great. So I'm going to wrap up this video at this point. In a later video, we're going to look at implementing pagination here. And as we start to add more functionality, you might start to notice even additional refactoring going on here and moving stuff to different places just to ensure that we're not refetching data that we've already fetched. But that's all I've got for you now. I hope you guys are enjoying this code review series. This has been Lucas from Better Coding Academy, and see you guys later.